you have your palm read essentially with the theory that here is someone who doesn't know much about you at all. And they are perhaps going to give you very specific and legitimate information about yourself. To see ourselves is one of the big reasons we're on this planet, I think, to know ourselves. And if somebody can pop up and affirm to you things you already knew and didn't want to admit, or hopes and promises that you would like to have faith in, but don't necessarily have enough of the optimism in yourself to concur with. I have read palms now for a terribly long time, it seems to me. Um, and having started when I was 15 and began to take money for the service when I was 30, and now 30 odd years later, I trembling on the abyss of maturity and adulthood and thinking I'm very, very blessed to have been told by a man in my 30th year. He said, "You don't understand. This is your vocation."
Mm.
And at that point in time, I had to acknowledge that that was one of the most constant things I'd been indulging myself with, even if it was between the ages of 15 and 30. Just a mere dilettante expression.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, I began to take myself seriously and hold myself to a higher standard. Not to be too flippant, I can hear as somebody sees this interview and has gotten a reading from me, and he says, if he's not flippant now, oh my God, what was he like before? Um, the hand is a mirror. It is a microcosm. Everything you are is there. It is also a changing mirror. I read in the Western tradition, the European tradition, and I read your passive hand, the hand you do not write with, as the map you have come in to work with. Your passive hand are the tools on the shelf, and your active hand is what you've done with it. Now, what's truly interesting to me is that both of these are changing media. If you break a habit, overcome a fear, achieve a goal, the lines in your hands will change. And by the same token, if in your passive hand you make some sort of a dramatic shift and change for what you think you are going to achieve or such, if somebody says, the kids are raised and I'm not going to continue to obsess over them, I'm going to go back and pick up the education that I gave up because I wanted to be the, constant parenting influence or something. We will see shifts in the passive hand in the whole realm of intellect, perhaps a different form of service to humanity, a very healthy detachment from the family and children, those sorts of things can come forward.
Um, that's amazing. So, my approach is always how do we make this practical as soon as we can? So, for someone looking at their own hand, what would be the first thing to look at to help them get an idea of who am I, and using the hand as a window to the self?
Well, that's a very fair question. And I think that the first thing we have to do is to be prepared to see the both strengths and weaknesses. Every strength is potentially a weakness. I can't say every weakness is a strength, but if we were to look at the hand and see that there were long pointed fingers and a fairly long narrow hand without a great deal of flesh in the hand, we would talk about sensitivity. And that sensitivity is a gift. It's a very valid gift, but then to say, therefore, we need to perhaps be careful with our physical body. And, little things like food and sleep may be very important. A degree of detachment to say, yes, this is a challenging and difficult world, or I work in a somewhat loud and perhaps even confrontive environment, but I don't have to be vulnerable there and I don't have to take it personally. Likewise, if I was to think of a certain client I've worked with very recently, and for him to recognize from his very full, strong. The man is quite mature, but he has an immense amount of chi. And to say, you know, if your family is going to tolerate you, you probably need to go to the gym and burn off some of this chi,
Mhm.
or go walking, or do something where this loud voice and effusive, extemporaneous expression of energy recognizes other people's boundaries. Um,
And how would you see that in the hand? Let's say.
he has a hand that looks inflated. It looks like we have inserted a straw and blown it up so it's made of small balloons, you know? He also has, though he is not a particularly fair complected man, there's a great deal of redness in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
He has no calluses. He's not working with his hands anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a certain, shall we say, his skin is rather thick. And I'm sure that his family feels like they have to tell him everything 3 times just before he can hear them.
So literally thick skin. That
He
has
is thick
actually,
skinned, absolutely. Now, how do you know you're thick skinned? Well, you got to pinch about a dozen. You pinch about a dozen hands on the back here and say, now you have a basis of comparison. What's a fast car? You won't know it until you've driven a few slow ones and a couple of faster ones.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's a great point. So vitality you can judge immediately by looking at one's hand.
To a degree, yes. Music in the hand, and certainly my hand is no capacity. I'm quite tone deaf. But we look at the hand, we look at the thumb, and we look at this edge from here to here, and what would be a heel of the thumb right here. Now I have neither.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a depression in this place, and I don't have a heel on my thumb.
Mm-hmm.
The heel of the thumb is about melody and harmony.
Mm-hmm.
It is about that aspect of music, and a depression between here and here is about rhythm and interval, you know.
So to review the heel, would you show the heel of the hand is?
Well, the heel of the hand is right here at the base of the thumb,
Mm-hmm.
right in there. And this is a terrible hand to use that as an example because there is none. And that would be melody and harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And this right here, a point between those, when it is depressed, when it dips down,
Mm-hmm.
that's an aspect of rhythm and interval.
Awesome.
Now, rhythm and interval may not necessarily be beating the drum. Timing, as the comedian has timing, or the dancer has timing. Are there excellent dancers without timing? I assume there are, but the concept is difficult for me to wrap my head around. So, the other question is we live in this aggrandized society where it isn't enough that you play music and enjoy yourself and don't disturb the neighbors. They find it pleasant. But no, we have to be a star, you know? And I have read poems, as we've already discussed, a very long time. And I've seen a few stars.
And how do you see the star? I think producers.
Everybody wants to know.
Yeah, this is the $20,000 question.
Well, what is a musical star? You know, I know a couple of gifted musicians who, in spite of their subtle, shall we say, shyness, have all the attributes of being an excellent studio musician, but they lack the charisma to be a performer. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, ask any performer. They want better musicians behind them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it does get complicated. However, here with our ring finger, the finger of Apollo, and if there would be a line that would rise up from the bottom into the finger of Apollo, it doesn't matter what other limitations they have, and it certainly doesn't guarantee many things, but the charisma of the performer will be there. Couple that with a little musical training, and some gift therein, and I'd say this is star material. But again, we all know that the highly challenged artists that are working to find their way may not be the people who become stars. In other words, how good are you? How lucky are you? How driven are you? And musical talent is not enough alone. If I was to see that rising line to the ring finger, I'd be very impressed. And I would say, yeah, you have the appetite and the need for the spotlight. Um, but there's also within that a certain capacity potentially of a risk taker.
Mm-hmm.
And we know many, many performing individuals who live for the risk.
Mm-hmm. And finally, and perhaps the most important question of all, why the pink scooter?
Because a young lady bought it. It was a freedom machine. It was an opportunity to step out of her mother's control. And then again, the angle of eccentricity between the little finger and the ring finger when the hand is extended as if you were reaching out and grasping, that angle of eccentricity, that's pretty eccentric. It's not the most eccentric we will ever see. There are other ways to define eccentricity too. This doesn't mean you got to drive a pink scooter or do anything incredibly obscure. It doesn't mean we have to have full body tattoos or something. But when we have that severe an opening there, there is a subtle constant need to do something that is to say, this is outside the norm. You know, it's not harming anybody, we would hope. It's not this and that, but
Yes.
this is not the status quo behavior. Interesting stories. Yeah, 1 million, 2 million. Very few people's lives are not interesting stories.
Mm-hmm.
If the reading is done in private, one-on-one, you know, I have taped all my professional readings, sometimes successfully, occasionally not.
Yeah.
And I have a technique of reaching over and turning off the tape and floating in something that's a little more personal. You know, probably one of the ones I'm really proud of. A young lady, and she was actually a year older than me. And she was fit and trim and active and vibrant and enthused. And I said, do you want it straight? And she said, yeah, I want it straight. I said, the man who has raised you is not your father. And it hit her like a bucket of water. And she said, that would explain a lot. And we did not keep in too much touch. She was in some distant state far away, and I was working in New Mexico. And she did get back in touch with me. And she said, I talked to my father, the man who had raised her, and he admitted. And then she said, years after that, she said, I talked to my mother, and all she would do is show me a picture and walk away.
So, Robin, how can people reach you for a more detailed discussion of their own hands and even perhaps to learn the art of palmistry themselves?
I have written a book, of course, with the extremely ambiguous title of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Palmistry. I believe somewhere out there there's a website. You probably find it with robinguilepalmistry.com, I think. Something like that.
All right.
And my phone number has been the same in ad infinitum, which is a New Mexico phone number of area code 505-266-0014. Let me state, if you call me and don't hear back, call me again. I travel a good deal. I am hideously disorganized. And I work by appointment. I can read palm prints sent to me by mail. I much prefer to see people in person. I work for people over the phone. I've done many readings for many clients that I've never met, never seen their palms. I do use other techniques too.